All right, this article from Psychology Today I thought was actually going to be really cool, but I wasn't as excited about it as you appeared to be. I had issues with it, so I want to go through it a little bit,
All right, let's go through it.
almost like we did the Jacobin article, but not quite as boring for everybody, I hope. So this is about philosophy, and it starts out with the term philosophy, which comes from Greek origins, means love of wisdom. The study of philosophy involves asking fundamental questions to better understand people's place in the universe and their relationships and responsibilities to each other. So far, so good, right? So for those of you who did not read the article, we're going to sort of go through it a little bit here, and so it doesn't matter if you did or not. And here's part of what I really liked about the article, Michael, was this section here. Like some branches of psychology and many wisdom traditions, key philosophical frameworks attempt to make sense of human existence and experience and to connect these experiences to the world at large. And these include logic, ethics, epistemology, and metaphysics. So far, so good.
Now,
The four,
importantly, I don't know, Mark, hold on one second. I don't know how much we've gotten into this, but psychology has its roots in philosophy. Originally, psychology was part of philosophy, and then with Wilhelm Wundt, you got to
Now,
love saying
talk
that
about
name.
that history a little bit because that's something
About
that I'm not
Wilhelm
aware.
Wundt,
Yeah.
I'm sure Katrin is just sick with the way I'm pronouncing it right now, but Wilhelm Wundt was, the first scientific psychologist. He wanted to study things, and they used introspection as a method.
What year
But
was this? And where
it
does he
was in
stand
the
in relationship?
1800s. It was in the late 1800s. I don't know the
So
exact year.
pre-Freud, pre Carl Jung.
Pre-Freud, yeah, pre-Freud. He's definitely pre-Freud. But even in Aristotle, on the soul was on psychology. The Stoics discussed, a lot of their stuff is incorporated now with, rational emotive behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy.
Which comes up in the article.
Yes, they discuss things, what upsets us, the impact our thoughts have on our actions, the nature of free will, which is still philosophy, but it also gets into psychology because, it's part of the mind. I've always questioned whether psychology actually should be broken from philosophy and treated as a science. The reason I say that is because if you want to measure something, let's say take something simple, water boiling. You hold all factors constant and then you adjust the variable of temperature to see when the water boils. And you come 212 degrees, the water boils. That's if there's no other variables involved. Now, obviously, I mean, there's other things that you could do to impact what's happening in that equation. Maybe throw ice in the water, maybe it's frozen,
That still
who
doesn't
knows?
change the fact that it boils at
No, no,
212 degrees.
water still boils at 212, no matter what. So maybe it was a bad example. But nonetheless, in science, you hold all variables constant except for those that you want to measure. The dependent variable and the independent variable. The independent variable is that which you are manipulating, and then the dependent variable is what is affected. But in the case of human beings, we have free will. So first of all, you can never hold all things constant because people have different experiences. They bring different things to the table, different genetics, different life experiences, whatever. So you can't hold all things constant. Plus, I might react today differently than I reacted yesterday to the same set of circumstances. So when you see, these psychological experiments, for instance, the Milgram experiments, and you see that it's not 100% of the time you're not getting these results. You're getting different results. Sometimes people respond differently than what's hypothesized. Or if you look at the learned helplessness experiments that Martin Seligman did. And after a while of doing the learned helplessness experiments, where dogs would learn to become, they won't try any longer because the hypothesis they feel helpless. They can't do anything to impact their environments. So, but then after a while, Martin Seligman said, okay, well, what about the dogs that aren't affected that way, that don't give up? What is it about them? And then when you bring humans into the equation, I mean, it's just there's an abundance of different things. So I question the wisdom of treating it as a science anyway. I'm not going so far as to say there should be no science of psychology. I'm just saying that I think that philosophy has a lot to add, and you simply can't treat human beings like rocks and chemicals and whatnot because we do have volition.
Right. You can't hold, so it really then shouldn't be treated as a science because you can't hold variables constant. You can't do the same kind of studies in the same way that you would be able to do scientific, right, to disprove a scientific theory. And so much of it is interlinked here. I mean, it says here the formal study of logic and decision making and in interrogating arguments and seemingly rational thought. That's what logic is. Axiology is the fancy term for the study of ethics and aesthetics. This type of philosophy seeks to understand what makes individuals' actions good or right. Epistemology examines belief, opinion, and objective knowledge as such. It can help people understand whether their closely held beliefs derive from objective or subjective information. And metaphysics questions the nature of reality and whether abstract concepts like truth or a higher power exist. It tries to understand why the universe is ordered the way that is. And when I think of those, all of those subjects of philosophy, Michael, I think I have the entire profile of the human psyche right there. All the questions that need to be answered, the perspectives that one needs to be had, seems to be answered through the quote unquote science of philosophy.
Axiology, actually, somebody can look this up, but I don't know that they've got it exact. Axiology is a study of the nature of value, I believe. I don't think it's ethics per se or aesthetics. I think it's the nature of value. Now, value, of course, is a core concept of ethics, but I don't know that axiology studies ethics per se. I'm pretty confident on this. Maybe somebody can look it up. It's in the audience. Maybe Manu, the psychology student that's in the the balcony here. But I'm curious. So far, what do you have any? What's your gripe with this article so far?
Well, once we start talking about the nature of consciousness, and once they start talking about how things are influenced by experience, the way they talked about it in a way made me feel like they implied that your philosophy is oftentimes determined by your upbringing. And since my philosophy was so the opposite of my you'd think the opposite of where I went. I took umbrage with
Okay,
that
well,
concept.
okay. So let's get to how let's get to this the next part here. How philosophy helps us. I just clicked something and maybe
Understand the mind and ourselves.
yeah. Okay, so
Hey,
get into that a
here's the
little bit.
part where I feel like there's contradictory concepts going on here at the same time, where they at once try to understand the physical nature of consciousness and what it is and how we experience consciousness. Psychology and neuroscience show us that many of our belief systems are adaptive. Now, I could believe that if you're in drift mode, your belief systems
Okay.
will be adaptive, right? If you're in drift mode. The aesthetics of what we find pleasing, the ethics of societal conduct evolved over time and aid in human survival and reproduction. Okay, I can also agree with parts of that. Your behaviors are adaptive, your tastes are that, sort of formed if you're in drift mode. Not if you're a free thinking human being who
No, well
understands the nature of
that's
your
true.
will.
But if you look at the dominant ethics or belief systems, what people find attractive, a lot of that stuff has evolved. I mean, that's not really disputable. I agree with you, of
Well,
course. I mean,
that's
if you,
because of what ideas become predominant in the culture too.
I agree with what you're saying, Mark. Ultimately, that, and but most people I find just adopt whatever is basically in the ethos of the environment that they grow up in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that
And unless you were going to take turn that switch, take an active approach to learning, to value assessment, to thinking, then I think that this is largely true.
I agree, but I
Okay.
think that means most people are in drift mode. It says here, as such, all philosophy has psychological underpinnings. Now, that falls into the arguments that people make about Rand, where they say, well, the only reason she became this individualist was because she experienced the Bolsheviks and she had such rage against socialism. It's not that socialism and communism are objectively evil ideas or that the Bolsheviks were objectively evil. It's that they took her father's pharmacy and they
Yeah.
took her shit and she didn't like it. And so they reduce a very profound and helpful rational philosophy to the experience of a spoiled woman who got dissed by the Reds. And I hate
Right,
that
but that's just
reductionism.
garbage, right? That's
Okay,
just
so
that. I mean, that's just garbage. I don't think that's what this is saying. To be fair,
but it says, as
that
such, all philosophy has psychological underpinnings, meaning, so I can get the concept that, the search for meaning can have psychological underpinnings. Your search for meaning compels you to find reasons to value, let's say, or reasons to live, or the opposite, and that puts you on a philosophical journey. Sometimes psychological pain can lead you to on a philosophical search.
sure.
It certainly did for me. Me not having a father made me search for mentors all the time in the form of teachers or people who could provide me with direction and guidance and values. And in that sense, my life experience, my psychology pushed me towards a philosophical journey. It didn't determine my philosophy because I ultimately rejected much of the
Right.
philosophy of my mentors, and found my own way. But it certainly was a catalyst. But I can't say that I can't put it in the terms that they're putting it in, because the terms imply drift to me, like a
Sure.
permanent human drift.
Yeah, I agree with that. As such, all philosophy, but now it's obvious that all philosophy does have psychological underpinnings in the sense that consciousness, reasoning, the neocortex are all involved in logical processing and thinking and induction and deduction. So that in that sense it's true. And then it goes on to say key philosophical inquiries including the relationship between mind and body, the meaning of free will and faith, the nature of consciousness and what constitutes happiness. This here I don't like, are simply
Yes.
components of our brain's operating system, and
Yes.
as
See, I knew
such can
you.
be framed philosophically or scientifically. Now, yeah, of course they can be, these questions can be framed scientifically or philosophically. They're ultimately philosophical questions, the deep meaning. But the word the phrase I have a problem with is here is simply components, as if these are just, the brain is just playing tricks on us and causing us to, think about these things, because
This
it's
is
not
Sam,
just
but this is Sam
simply
Harris on
components.
crack. This is Sam Harris on crack, where your brain is an independent physical entity responding to things outside of your awareness, and it's puppeteering you basically. That's what that sentence implies to me, right? And that's what I didn't like about it. Components of the brain's operating system. Please, I'm not just a vat of physical components. Free
No.
will is something here, and they tries
Here,
to explain it later on down the line, but I thought it was a piss poor explanation,
yeah.
which only makes me feel that psychology is in the dark ages. Hey,
All right.
what do
So
you
get a
what do
what?
you think about this? What do you think about this? Because I thought this was an interesting formulation, Michael. Plato said that thinking is the mind's conversation with itself.
I actually like that formulation. There
I
may
did like
be
that formulation.
there might be things wrong with it. Like if I really dug into it philosophically, I'm not prepared to commit to it wholeheartedly. But I do like it because when I'm in my head thinking, I often am having a conversation with myself. That's the experience that I get internally. So I think that makes sense. I think it's a pretty good formulation.
Yeah, it's also a conversation with reality too. Even though reality might not be answering back, you're still sometimes exchanging with the outside world. I personally have this dialogue out loud. I don't know about anybody else. Maybe this happens when you get to be 60. Manu is shaking or nodding, so I'm assuming I'm not the only one who talks to myself in public as I'm resolving issues. Okay, good. So many of us do. Many of us appear to be schizophrenic when we're actually just sorting out an issue. I like this formulation. It goes on to say, because the core modes of self-interrogation in psychotherapy and psychology are indeed built into philosophical precepts. Now that I
Yes,
like. That I like.
absolutely.
I like the formulation that Socratic dialogue and Stoicism are evident in the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy, as you said, in rational emotive behavioral therapy. Now, one of the things that I loved about Stoicism, even when I first got to know Rand, was I felt I felt that Stoicism, and somebody can contradict me if you disagree with me, if you're into the Stoics, if you've ever read Marcus Aurelius or any of the Stoics. um, I thought it was great emotional triage, Michael. Like if you are in a dark fucking place, Stoicism can really sort of help you out of it. Like objectivism doesn't necessarily do that. Even though objectivism is a highly optimistic, forward-looking, progressive ideology, and it takes sadness as incidental, right? It takes grief as incidental, as passing states in a way. It takes joy as the fundamental, goal. And I feel like that alienates a lot of people in a way. And that's why Stoicism is capturing so many folks because it deals with, people, what people really feel inside, which is like, I'm lost, I'm fucked up, I'm unhappy, I don't feel like I'm reaching my goals, I can't control this, I can't control that. That's all, all these elements in their lives are making them unhappy. And Stoicism teaches them sort of what's important and what isn't, what you should focus on and what you can't, what shouldn't, what you can control and what you can't. Now, it's basically sad and basically, in the sense of a maudlin philosophy that, sees its end and just says, "Oh well, I know it's happening, so I have to sort of, flow with it." But I found it to be very helpful when I was in a very dark emotional place, especially in my 20s, when I was in a very dark emotional place. Stoicism, Marcus Aurelius actually helped me get over that hump.
You know, it's interesting. Uh, what actually interested me in Marcus Aurelius, can you guess what it is? I'm going to see if you can guess. What first interested me in Marcus Aurelius?
That he was a thinking emperor.
I'll give you a greater hint. It was a result of a movie I watched when I was, I
The
believe,
gladiator.
14. No,
The
I'm
gladiator.
49. No, I was 14. So you're talking 1990. It's
Oh, that wasn't,
pre-Gladiator.
it's pre-gladiator. Spartacus.
Read Marcus Aurelius, First Principles. What is it that Billy does? He covets. The idea of going to first principles, I was introduced to by one Hannibal Lecter in Silence of the Lambs,
Get out of
where,
here.
yes, where was it Clarice goes, he's in the big cage and he tells her read Marcus Aurelius, and that was my first introduction to Marcus Aurelius. And much later in life I actually read him. What I like about Stoicism, whether it be Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus or Titus or however you want to pronounce it, there's a few very good things in there. One is that our feelings are largely a result of the way that we think, and that by changing the way that we think we can change the way that we feel. And also the idea of that cognitive behavioral therapy brings into it is errors in our thinking. That our emotional disturbances are often the result of magnifying things, blowing them out of proportion, false generalities, either or thinking, all or nothing thinking when it doesn't apply, that sort of thing. And, I spent about 6 months, I think, doing thought reports on things that were upsetting me. And magnification was big for me, mind reading as well. We're both very big on the thinking errors for me. I would blow things out of
Talk about
proportion.
that. Talk about that because I think that's important for
I
people to,
will, but I
to
wanted to tell you
understand.
something that I learned that was an unintended consequence of this. I later on would go back through the journals to see, okay, what are the commonalities in my thinking? What are the errors that I'm frequently committing? But as a side effect, what I learned was probably 99% of the things that I was worried about never happened, never amounted to anything. I
Mm.
was would literally be in full tizzy mode, stressed out to my core over things that never ended up happening. But yeah, so well, mind reading is, it goes like this. I mean, I don't know how many people have ever heard of this example, but it's an interesting one, probably apocryphal. But there's a guy, he's on a subway, and his kids are just acting a fool. He's with two kids, and the kids are going crazy. They're making all kinds of noise, and people around are getting aggravated, and the guy's just sitting there. He's not doing anything about it. And so somebody says to the guy, "Hey, dude, you want to get a hold of your kids?" And the guy says, "Huh? Oh, yeah, I'm sorry." And he gathers up the kids and he says, their mother just died. We just came from the hospital. I'm out of sorts, and they're all wound up. And the way that the people around their emotions change now because they had an additional context of what was actually going on with this guy. and it made it understandable. And it's similar where if a guy, in prison, we have this a lot where somebody cuts you in line and you could look at it like, the thoughts go through your head. Oh, this guy thinks I'm a chump. He thinks I'm a sucker. Why does he think he can get away with this? Or you could just say, you know what? Who cares? This guy, he's just a dick. It has nothing to do with me. Or maybe he didn't even realize he's doing it, whatever. But the way that we frame it, how we view the situations affects how we're feeling. So now I could do mind reading. You and I could have a conversation. And you just, for instance, went through a big loss with Frankie. So maybe we're talking one day and you're just not really hearing what I'm saying. You're not interested. And so we hang up the phone. Now, I might say to myself, poor Mark, he's going through it right now. God bless him. I get it. Or I could say, I wonder if Mark doesn't like me anymore. Why is Mark acting like that towards me? And that would be an example of mind reading. There's also,
Well,
also jumping to conclusions is a big part of it as
and I
well.
and I love the fact that Stoicism forces you to check that stuff. It doesn't.
Yes.
It says your emotions. It in essence says your emotions aren't primaries. They're not. They don't necessarily predict what's going on in the world, and you should question them. You should look beyond them and for the rational conclusion, which I really like about that. I was going to say something else, but then I forgot because you were talking so long.
What is that? A shot? Are you taking a
Yeah,
shot?
it was a
Am I
shot, but
mind reading? Am I mind reading right now?
you-
Manu's giving me a
oh,
dirty look.
what you said was straight out of Stephen Covey. I don't know if you said Stephen Covey because I sort of drifted for a minute, but is Stephen Covey's seek first to understand, then be understood, which is a great principle. It's something that I don't do on Twitter. Well, now I do because I'm just giving up on the whole arguing thing on Twitter for real. But I know I've said it millions of times, but it's true. It's true this time. I swear. Anyway, I found I
That's toxic, by the way. Well, go
it
ahead. We're going to
is.
talk about
I
Twitter in a
find
minute,
that
but go
I
ahead.
find that seeking first to understand and then be understood is a very good psychological orientation to have towards people because it stops short that assuming that mind reading that you projecting your own assumptions onto another person's behavior. Instead, you try to figure out what's up first. That way, you don't have that gut level reaction to the guy who's not paying attention to what his kids are doing and you get all mad and frustrated when in fact the guy's just lost. It really does change your orientation towards the world. So look, he had developed the attention schema theory of consciousness to explore this very question, whether or not consciousness is an illusion. Essentially, he argues that the human brain evolved an oversimplified model of how it processes sensory input and directs attention. Oversimplified um, called schema, so as not to get overwhelmed by the physical details of what's happening. He suggests that our subjective inner experience or consciousness only feels non physical because over the years our brains have adopted schemas as a type of mental shortcut. So we're not aware of all the physical processes that are actually occurring as we have firsthand experiences in the world. Michael, what living entity on the world is aware of its brain's functioning, like the actual functioning of any organ of its body, unless it's sick?
Okay. So the first thing is this an illusion to what? This is what Ayn Rand called the fallacy of the stolen concept, right? Asserting a concept while denying its antecedents. So the whole idea of an illusion is an illusion to what? To a consciousness, right? If you don't have consciousness, you don't have illusions. This guy here says there's no such thing as consciousness and then says this is a mental shortcut. Well, what does mental refer to? Mental does not refer to a physical entity. Mental refers to mind, to consciousness. So it's just codswallop. It's bullshit. Manu says it's a behaviorist. I'm not. I wouldn't go that far, only because it's not talking about stimulus response, that sort of thing. As in, let me see if I can impress Manu, uh, John B. Watson or Edward Thorndike, for instance, or B.F. Skinner.
But
Okay.
he's just. You're such a name dropper, dude.
You should see how I drop your name when
Dave's.
I'm out on the town.
I know because you fucking text me and then call me and like call me right now. I'm like I'm busy, dude.
Dude, if I
Um,
didn't have a girlfriend, that would be my pickup line. You like Supernatural?
I'm so, so sorry for you. Um, Look, I mean, yeah, this bugs me. This just bugs me. Where it tries to place consciousness entirely in the seat of a physical apparatus that we're just, and it goes even instead of what it is. Now, Michael, why is psychology going so far afield? Why are they going so far away from identifying simply what Rand said consciousness is? Even if we don't know what it's composed of, even if it has physical elements to it, so what? It's still a faculty of awareness.
I think that there's a big push where these people want to be treated as scientists, right? And their model of science is physics. So they look to physics and then they want to model every science after physics, but every science is not physics. The methodology has to fit what you're trying to study. And so, but what they try to do is get rid of the mind and make us pure physical
Yeah,
symptoms.
man, we're not mechanistic.
Yeah, yeah.
You can't.
Well, Dr. Skinner, by what means are you studying? What are you thinking? What are you drawing your conclusions with? In B.F. Skinner's book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, he talks about there's no free will and then proceeds to talk about all the things we should be doing. Again, it's a stolen concept. If everything's determined, there's no means by which you're recommending a should to anybody. Everything's
Absolutely.
just going to be what it is.
Look, I want to get on with the mind as the extended mind hypothesis, Michael. Some experts believe that certain cognitive processes and even mental states extend outside of the individual mind, Michael. Extend
Yeah.
often into the physical world. For example, an Alzheimer's patient might write down important information in a notebook so they could refer back to it, or somebody might rely on their spouse or a group of friends to help them recall important details or creatively problem solve. In addition, most people turn to the internet as a source of knowledge they don't already have ready available at their own hands. Why is this called extended mind?
I don't know. But I mean, it sounds like you're just making reminders.
Yeah,
So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why
it's not
anyone
like your
would call it.
consciousness is physically extending into the world. So it's not like you're extending your consciousness into the world for real, Michael. It's a bizarre psychology is in a bizarre state. So what are we all supposed to take from this article? I mean,
Uh,
it says on the one hand that
there's
philosophy is
another.
the
There was
handmaiden
another
of
part you left
psychology.
out. You left out the other part. Why is it so difficult to accept the randomness of life?
Why is it so difficult to accept the randomness of life?
It
Human
says human.
brains.
You go
Are you
ahead.
going to say, or do you want me
No,
to read
you're
it?
gonna go.
Let
You're
me
gonna
read it
say
for
it.
the first time, please. Thank you. Human
Okay.
brains evolved to recognize patterns, identify cause and effect, and generally seek out meaning in life. When events, whether fortunate or not, occur by chance, it may be hard psychologically to accept the outcome. People tend to blame themselves for problems that are out of their control or the result of bad luck. This can lead to great anguish, such as survivor's guilt. Scientists suggest that accepting randomness in life often leads to reduced emotional stress, suffering. I don't find anything necessarily wrong with that.
I like it. I think that it's true. I think that conspiracy theorists, for instance, are very prone to not be able to accept any randomness, anything that just occurs. Everything has to be done with intention. It always has to be somebody's planned on it, somebody's made it happen. It's just not the case. Bad shit in life happens, and it sucks. But what are you going to do? I mean, you
They
just
do
deal
this,
with it
Michael,
and move on.
they do this with everything they want to gain control over. 9/11, 9/11. It was actually the Jews, it was the Mossad, it was George Bush, one of the most incompetent presidents. Somehow it was able to organize logistically the destruction of these two massive buildings, which people don't understand is would have been a logistical nightmare to keep that a secret. Or Kennedy. Kennedy wasn't just assassinated by a lone maniac, Marxist wannabe. fool. It had to be something, some collusion between the mafia and the CIA because of Kennedy's rejecting Vietnam and turning his back on the Cuban exiles who went to fight in the Bay of Pigs. And they, over and over and over again, they try to lend greater meaning and significance to these totally random events. Yes, all of the presidents who have been assassinated by idiots, morons, and freaks who happen to fall through the cracks. There was one conspiracy with Lincoln, and it was a bad one, and it mostly failed, except for an actor who actually did it. But they're still creepy, stupid idiots.
I like
Um,
this. Idiots, morons, and freaks. Oh my.
Yes, that's right. Folks, Michael, let's encapsulate this chaotic meeting today. This article starts out as philosophy is the handmaiden of psychology. It's sort of a necessity, it's sort of a basis for psychological inquiry. Why do we fucking need psychology, as you said? Why do we even need the science? If philosophy can help us answer the fundamental questions of life and interrogate our own feelings so that we can question whether our feelings are representative of stuff that's actually going on in life, why the fuck do we need psychology?
Because I don't think it does answer all the questions that we need answered. I think that you can broadly discuss things like free will. I think ethics would teach you how to use free will or the proper way to use it. Psychology can teach us methods of how to change, what to do, that sort of things. You know what I mean? That sort of thing. So I
Yeah, but
do think
philosophy does that as well.
broadly speaking, I think psychology can get really into the nuts and bolts of things.
Give me an
Like
example.
An example would be the cognitive distortions and how to work through them. I mean, that's
But you
cognitive
can
behavioral
understand that, can't
therapy.
you understand that through introspection and a proper understanding of metaphysics and
Well,
epistemology?
you need guidance. My
Okay.
thing is what I'm trying to tell you is psychology does have things to offer. There are experiments I think that do lend understanding or lend knowledge to what's going on. Like when people, for instance, clearly they're wrong about something, or clearly they're right rather, but everybody disagrees, and then they change their opinion. There
Yeah.
are studies like that that I think do add value. I just think we don't want to blow them up too much.
All right.
It could be.
So the conclusion is that we do need psychology for some deep dive diagnoses, but
Yes.
philosophy is also a great framework from which to start. If you're starting with a rational philosophy, like objectivism, for example, it could be a great beginning first steps for you taking towards moving towards the direction of psychological well-being and health. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Why did
I'm
you look
with
at
you
me?
on that. I
Okay, good.
wasn't looking at you. The problem is that there's all types of stuff going on in the screen. But yeah, we definitely need philosophy. Philosophy gives us a broad framework of how to approach life, how to gain knowledge, what is reality, how we should behave, the broad parameters of how politics should be organized. But psychology is more focused on, well, it could be groups of people or individual people, but it also can be very helpful in the change process. I actually have a good psychology book right here. I'm going to finish it, I hope, today. The Life Changing Science of Detecting Bullshit.
Who wrote that?
John V. Petrocelli. I
And
want to
so
interview this guy, but very
can
good book.
and tell us a little bit about it. And Lou, is there a way to put that book in the I don't know, like do we have show notes or something like yeah, so that people can refer to that, and so I can
Do the women in the
another book
audience
to my
or do
fucking
the
thing.
women in the audience or Subby have any questions? Aren't we supposed to throw it out and see if they have any questions for us?
Yes. Does anybody have questions about this intersection of psychology and philosophy as we've
Yeah.
discussed it today? All right, folks, I have to get going because I have to go to a convention, a very uncrowded convention.
Listen, audience, we love you. Thank you so much for joining us on our Saturday. Although that you couldn't be doing anything else, there is a lot that you could have been doing instead of joining us for a great conversation and some great laughs.
It was fun. I had fun. I hope you guys had fun, and we'll see you next week for sure. Good seeing you. Peace.